Hi everyone, it's Lauren and welcome to my January wrap-up where I'm going to talk about and review all of the books that I read last month. The first book that I read in January and my first book of 2016 was Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. This was a reread for me and I read it because I did a page to screen episode on Sense and Sensibility which came out last week. This was just a really nice, enjoyable reread for me. I read Sense and Sensibility for the first time quite a long while ago actually. I think it was one of my first Austens that I'd ever read. If you're unfamiliar with the story of Sense and Sensibility, it follows the Dashwood sisters who are disinherited and when their father dies and become poor, and then it follows their trials and tribulations through love. And you have Eleanor, who is very sensible and reserved, and Marianne, who is very wild and passionate, and they approach love in very different ways. I like Sense and Sensibility. I think it's a really nice book. I think, to be honest, I probably prefer the film adaptations than to reading the book, which is a bit controversial, but I think it's because I saw the film in 1995 with Emma Thompson before reading the book, so I always just have that in my mind. But I do think this is a really nice introduction to Austen, and it's probably quite a nice introduction to classics as well. The next thing I read was a graphic novel, which was Through the Woods by Emily Carroll. I was very excited to read this book. I know lots and lots of people love it. I've seen it all over BookTube and I've had friends who've recommended it to me. And it takes the form of lots of short stories, I suppose, or comic strips, which are all spooky, foresty, fairy tale-y elements, and it's quite gory. And I was really excited to pick it up. I'm not sure if maybe the hype around this book made me have greater expectations, but I didn't enjoy it that much. I did think the artwork was absolutely beautiful. There's a particular story called, I think the lady has cold hands or something, which is very beautiful, and 18th century artwork and lots of blues and yellows, and I just thought that was very gorgeous. But I didn't find any of the stories particularly spooky, and I wasn't that concerned about finding out what the twist was. So although I really loved the artwork, I wasn't that overly fussed about the content, to be honest, which is a bit of a divisive opinion perhaps, but I would love to read anything else that Emily Carroll has done, so if you have any recommendations for me, that would be fantastic if she's published anything else. But I just wasn't overly enamoured with the actual stories. I then read another short story collection, I suppose, which was No One Belongs Here More Than You by Miranda July. I got this last year when we had our London booktuber meetup in about June or July, I think it was. And I'd seen this on a couple of people's channels, I think, and then just saw it in a bookshop, read the first page, really liked the prose, and just picked it up on a whim, really. If you don't know who Miranda July is, I suppose you would call her a sort of all-encompassing artist. I mean, she is a writer, she's also written a novel, and she writes articles, and she's also a filmmaker. I've seen one of her films, which is No One Belongs Here More Than You. That's the name of this book. Which the film that I've watched is You, Me and Everyone We Know. I've seen that one. I absolutely devoured this book. The themes that you get throughout the short stories are ideas of identity and isolation, I suppose social anxiety, sexuality, and it's all encompassed with Miranda July's very specific, unique view of the world. Every time I read a new story, I just imagined Miranda July as the main character because the voices were very similar. But I enjoyed that. I think if you enjoy her writing style, then you will enjoy this collection. The stories aren't really very distinct, and I think a failing, maybe not on the book's part, but perhaps on my part, is that I read it in about a day because I was really enjoying it, so I just kept going through all of the stories and just racing through them, which meant by the time I got to the end of the book, I think I was a bit bored with the style, which is, you know, it's a book of short stories. They're not supposed to necessarily be read one after another like that. And on reflection, I probably should have, you know, paced them out over the course of a day or two, or while I was reading something else. But it does show that I really enjoyed her writing style, and I did think it was very interesting. I particularly liked the way she handled the social isolation and the differing ways that we relate to each other and attempting to forge relationships. And it has got a very offbeat comedy to it. It's quite quirky and oddball and all those kind of words that I normally don't really like, but it just works really well, I think, in her writing. Then I picked up a book which was sent to me by Picador, which is Willful Disregard by Lena Andersson. This has been translated from Swedish, I think? Yeah, Swedish. This is about a woman called Esther who falls in love with a man that she only meets a few times, really, as an artist who she gives a lecture on. She then meets him after her lecture, they have a dalliance, and she just falls absolutely head over heels in love with him, and he's not necessarily as receptive to her love. So it's kind of a story of a very passionate, very intense woman falling apart. I have so many feelings about this book, and I'm really, really frustrated with it because I'm not sure if it's been translated that well, and it's difficult for me to say that because I haven't read the Swedish version, and I'm sure there's not very many people who would be able to have read the Swedish version and then compare this one. But it was such a strange experience because I felt like underneath everything, underneath the clunky prose, I felt like there was some really interesting writing, but the way it's been translated, I felt like it didn't come across very well. It was very difficult to read, and I think that's because Esther is very, very philosophical. She's a scholar, as is the man Hugo, who she's obsessed with, and so they have these intellectual debates, which it is so difficult to get through some of their sentences and understand what they mean. And I think it's because the English is so overly formal that they're using, and every now and again there would be a sentence or there'd be a paragraph and I'd think, oh yeah, that's really good, I really like that, but it was just few and far between, and that was so frustrating for me because I could just sort of see underneath it that if I'd read this in the original Swedish, I would have probably really enjoyed it. For example, she calls her group of friends the girlfriend chorus, and it's like the girlfriend chorus doesn't approve of what she's doing, and I really liked that. But at the same time, the phrase the girlfriend chorus I found quite awkward. That's quite an awkward phrase, but I knew what she meant. But I'm just not sure if it just translates that well. So it's so frustrating. To be honest, it's not a very long novel. I've probably, if it had been longer, I probably wouldn't have finished it because I was just finding it such a struggle. Considering it's only about 200 pages, I did push through, and I was interested to see what would happen, but it was an uphill battle really to get through it, and that's just such a shame. I then read another of my page to screen picks, which was The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. This again was a reread for me, and I read this a very, very long time ago, and I quite liked it, but I just don't think I really knew what to expect. Rereading this, however, I really enjoyed it a lot more than I did the first time round. I think one, because I knew what to expect, so I could maybe enjoy just the writing a little bit more rather than trying to work out what was going on in the plot. And also probably my own reading has matured since then. This is about the achingly rich upper classes of America, mainly in the New York area, and you have Jay Gatsby, who throws lavish parties every couple of weeks, just has so much money, but is in love with someone who is already married. But apart from just enjoying what's going on in the plot, I actually really enjoyed the writing. I mean, since reading The Great Gatsby the first time, I have since then read The Beautiful and the Damned, which I quite liked as well, and I really enjoyed this a lot more, and I'm really pleased that I reread it, so I'll be interested to watch all of the adaptations of it from the page to screen project, because I think that's going to be really fun. And then I tried something completely new, and I decided to have a go at reading some fantasy. So I read The Assassins Apprentice by Robin Hobb, which is the first of her Farseer trilogy, I think. This tells the story of a boy without a name who is the bastard son of one of the princes of the kingdom, and he gets left at the castle one day and sort of grows up half belonging but half not belonging, and all sorts of courtly intrigue going on. I don't really know what I was expecting from this book. I know a lot of people really, really like Robin Hobb, and so maybe it's just because it's the first book, but it was fine. I didn't really feel compelled to read it. I was interested to read it, but I didn't really connect with any of the characters that much. Even the main narrator I didn't really love, and I'm not sure how skillful the world building is, but it was okay. I enjoyed reading it, and it was an interesting experience because I haven't read some fantasy like that for a really long time, so I did enjoy learning about the new world. Now, Holly at Library at the Edge of the World said that her books get better as you keep going, so I will keep going. I shall strive, and hopefully I will start enjoying them a bit more. And then finally, I am so pleased, the last book that I finished in January was Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. I've been reading this book for such a long time. I'm just so pleased to have finished it, because it became one of those sort of gremlins in my mind that I just felt like, oh, I haven't finished it yet. I have already read Anna Karenina, so this was a reread for me, and I really enjoyed it. And what I liked about Anna Karenina the first time was that it's such a cast of characters, it's so intricate, the world is so fully fleshed out, it's so impressive when you read it the first time. After I'd finished it, I felt like someone I knew had died. Like, I felt like I knew the characters because I'd just been with them for such a long time, and I understood the intricacies, inner workings of their minds so well that I always knew that I wanted to reread it. And I'm really pleased to say that on rereading it, I did enjoy it just as much, and I remembered why I loved it so much the first time. The main arc of the book is Anna Karenina, who is a married woman in high society Russia, and she falls in love with a soldier and kind of runs away with him. But it's about so much more than that. It's about kind of, I mean, it's about everything. I don't even know how to describe the story. There's so many different characters, and they have thoughts about society, about God, about the self, and then love and families and work, and it's like everything. And what is quite interesting is that I never feel like Anna is really the main character. Like, she is, everything's sort of linked to her, but there are chapters and chapters on other characters, and they're not really secondary to Anna. You really get to see inside their heads as well, and I think that's one of the reasons I loved it so much. So I'm very pleased to have reread it, and also now I'm very pleased to have completed it. So I would love to hear from you if you've read any of these books and what else you were reading in January. I hope everyone had a very good reading month, and I will see you in my next video. Bye! The theory for why we find this period in our lives so difficult is that we've been trained to compare ourselves to our peers all the time at school. You have a very clear set of expectations at school, and you know how to achieve them, and once you've achieved them, you get maybe marks out of 10, and you understand your place in that society.